Good morning and welcome to Daily Spark with Dr. Emma. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about hopes and dreams, about a children's book. That's right, we are sharing a children's book with you today. Now, as an author, I think that children's book authors are just amazing because they have to be able to convey their message in a very intriguing way, an interesting way, a polite way, but yet and still they have fewer pages and they're able to convey this beautiful message. So, you know what I'm going to say. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, get your tea, because we are about to get started. My author today is Ann Marie Hannon, and she has written the book all about a boy who was afraid of the dark and how he got over it. Good morning, Ann Marie. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
My pleasure, Dr. Angela. My pleasure. I must say I love radio. I grew up with radio, and it's allowed my imagination to be sparked. No pun intended.
I love it, though. Yes. You know, when you talk about that, I remember being over my grandmother's house, and she had the I'm going to say the family radio, the one that would be in the beautiful wood console that you would tune in and listen to the mystery stories and the news and all of that. And I just thought that was so beautiful. It was very reminiscent of the time of the classic black and white movies. So being able to listen to the radio, I love it. So being on the radio now is such a privilege, and it is definitely not missed on me. So thank you so much for mentioning that. Now, so many times we read a bio about who a person is and all of that, and you have so much to share, and I don't want to be I don't want it to be boring. So I'm going to ask you, who are you in your own words?
Well, basically, I'm just an average woman and a mother and a grandmother. I've always loved reading and writing, and my mother loved words. And I don't know if you know, she used to read the dictionary because when she was a little girl, the dictionary and the Bible were the only books her mother, my grandmother, could afford. So I think part of the reason why I'm here today and part of the reason of who I am today is in honor of my mother, as well as to present my books. And here's why. My first book was co-authored with my mom. It's a picture book for youngsters.
Mm-hmm.
It'll alert them to the dangers of roaming away from home. And my mom sent me the original poem for this story as a gift for her grandchildren, my children. And I loved it immediately. I thought of publishing it as a book with a different ending, some important edits, and also illustrations. Now, I'm not an artist, but I did try to develop illustrations for the story, and some of the reviews for Puffy and the Formidable Foe, which is the title, actually say they like the illustrations. Well, the good news is that in 2013, I submitted Puffy and the Formidable Foe to Reader's Favorite and also to Writer's Digest. And Puffy and the Formidable Foe was judged outstanding at that particular event. So as an author, I'm interested in various urban trends and cultural influences that affect all young children today. Most of my books are for young kids to help them to deal with their worries and to offer ways to help solve the problems they may face. And an aha moment recently for me was when all 3 of my children's books currently published were named among the best in family-friendly media by Mom's Choice Awards. And Mom's Choice Awards goes by MCA. And each book received an MCA seal of excellence. I'm just very honored, very grateful. The MCA Awards are due to a rigorous evaluation process. Samples of my books were provided to educators, family persons, children even. And as a result, I received that commendation and the seal.
Now, did you always know that you wanted to be an author? Like when you were a young person, perhaps elementary school or high school, did you know that you wanted to be an author?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but in those days, if somebody wanted to be an author or a writer, most of the advice would be, you're never going to get a job doing that. How are you going to support yourself? But I've always loved reading what others have written, and that made me inclined to want to share my own thoughts and values and beliefs in writing and poetry, and realizing there's no guarantees.
Right. Now, what have you found to be true for you over the years to be your motivation for writing? Do you find inspiration in like the everyday things, like some common things, or does a particular thing need to happen in order to really prompt you or urge you to get in and start writing?
I think in earlier years, I felt that I had to write the grand novel, the bestseller, something along those lines. But my life journey didn't quite, go directly in that kind of a direction. And I had a number of different jobs where I did writing, policy writing and grants management writing. And I even received extensive training as a mediator. And so I helped parties, individuals, to work together to resolve their differences. And I think when I had my own life experience that I treasured, that I believed in, that was the foundation for the type of book that I originally came out with, co-authored with my mom, and then the other books that I've written and the ones that I still have on the table and am drafting for eventual publication. And I know that I influence myself most with regard to writing, but there were others that influenced me as well.
Sorry to cut you off there. Your book, all about a boy who was afraid of the dark and how he got over it. How did you come up with that title? Did you find that the title came to you first and you wrote the book around the title, or were you writing and the title kind of came out of the book?
Well, that's a good question. And when I first wrote the story, it was a little 2-page story, and the title was The Boy Who Was Afraid of the Dark. And I went to have the title copyrighted, and it turned out there was also another book already copyrighted with that title. So what I had to do then was, again, use my imagination, my editorial thoughts, and that's how I came up with the title, because it's really the reflection of the story itself. But I can't say that it was based on anything other than my imagination, because of a little piece that is part of the book. And if I have time, or if you have time, there's a small piece from the book that I'd like to read, a little excerpt.
Sure, we can definitely do that. Perhaps when we come back from break. Sure, I believe we'll have time to do that. I wanted to ask you about the main character of the book. How did you decide as far as giving him a name and the personality? How did you decide on how to do that?
Well, the book itself came about in what I would call stages. One, it was just a story that I wrote in order to maybe share with my children. And as far as the names go, they were just familiar names to me. My husband's father was named Patrick, and so I picked that name. And my daughter at the time was named after my father's grandmother, Marguerite, but that was shortened to Margie. And so those are the names for the stories. And I think a lot of authors will tend to do something like that, too, in honor of someone.
Absolutely.
I have someone right now who's asked me to use her name in one of my stories, and her name is Autumn. And I think Autumn is a beautiful name. So I have to make that character a beautiful character.
Oh, what a beautiful way to be mindful. I love that. And, you are so right that we do have a tendency to write about the familiar or use those things that are familiar to us because we're able to convey them in such a beautiful and meaningful way. I love that. Now, that was something that, and thank you for mentioning that there are people who will come up to you and say, hey, use my name, because I was going to ask you, is it okay for that budding artist, author out there, to say, I have a great relationship with my sister. Is it okay if I use my sister's name to convey a point? So thank you for sharing that you used your family members to add their names. That is so wonderful. Now, when you were writing the story, did you make a point to put in certain messages? Like, was there a certain something that you wanted to make sure if they get to page 6, then they would have, gotten the nugget that I wanted to leave?
Yeah, I think that there are many, many different ways for writers to write, and there are many different types of techniques, practices, methods, even unconventional types of ways of writing nowadays, more so than maybe even in the past, but not necessarily. Every time I go into different biographies of writers, I find new information that maybe they went a little outside the curve and found themselves either not appreciated or very appreciated. But I always keep the main theme and message of an original story that I may draft. And that's what happens in All About a Boy. And this time I'm going to shorten the title. But when Patrick is alone and afraid and Mom and Dad are not there to help, essentially the message deals with the way that siblings can work together to solve a problem. And that's essentially what happens. He wakes up at nighttime. For the first time, his nightlight is out. And, what does he do?
Yeah.
Ooh, and who does he wake up? And who comes to the rescue? Margie. So it's actually yes, about the the boy who was afraid of the dark and how he got over it. But it's also Margie and the way that Margie is able to work to help him because he's the youngster. And the beauty of the story is that it's, in my opinion, a universal message. And right now I'm thinking of having it translated. I'm thinking of changing the characters so that different racial and ethnic individuals are the characters. And I would feel perfectly comfortable in doing that in order to promote this universal message of siblings working together.
Absolutely, and having blended families, that would all definitely work in. Well, Ann Marie, it is time for us to go to break. If you would please, can you remind everyone what is the title of this book, where can we pick up a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, I'll make it easy. The title is All About a Boy Who Was Afraid of the Dark and How He Got Over It. My website is at authorsden.com. That's plural, authors, AUTHORSDEN.com /my full name, Ann Marie Hannon, ANNMarieHannon.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Back. Thank you so much for joining me for our Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I want to do on the show. I want to enlighten you, I want to inspire you, and I want to empower you. And today we are doing that with the little ones. We're talking about a children's book, All About a Boy Who Was Afraid of the Dark and How He Got Over It. My guest today is author Ann Marie Hannon, and I just love that she has chosen to be a children's book author and sharing her wit and wisdom with our little ones. Now, Ann Marie, I wanted to ask you about the benefit of reading to your children. Now, be it that you are the parent or you're a sibling, a grandparent, or perhaps you're just a guardian or a caregiver. But why is it so important that we read to our little ones?
Well, I think one of the major pieces of, and thank you for asking, by the way, it's a great benefit when parents read with their children. And most of the books that I write are geared to that capability. They are short, easy to read, easy to understand. If one of the books ever happens to have what I call big words, that's a plus because it will encourage a rich vocabulary. And I even offer a tutorial with the meaning of the words that I use in my books for anyone that requests it. And we all know that it's good for kids when their parents read to them, and as you mentioned, even as grandparents read to them. It's a way that allows us to enter our children's world. And that's why so many of my books are interactive, with guidance to help parents engage their children after reading each book. Sometimes that can be sustaining for everyone. And I think that thought, that concept resonates a lot in terms of how I think about life and how I like to look at life experiences. It's a quote I recently found, and it says, "I never lose. Either I win or I learn." I think that would be wonderful to share with as many as possible of your listeners. And I must say, I found that quote because someone put it at the end of an email to me. And later on, I found out that it is attributed to Nelson Mandela.
It is definitely a very motivational and inspirational quote. That is one of the things that I share on my Monday Motivation program. And I tell you, when you come across it, however you come across it, it really and truly is one of those quotes that kind of get down in your heart. It gets down in your spirit, and you go, yeah, that's true. Let's make sure that that it is one or the other. I love that. Now, you mentioned earlier that you would love to share an excerpt from All About a Boy Who Was Afraid of the Dark, and I would love for you to be able to do that. While you prepare for that, I want to ask you another question, and that is, when you were deciding on the lesson to place in each of your books, because I do understand that you have several books that you've written. Did you decide that you wanted to make a point about that particular thing? Because in living life, you've noticed that parents or those that are dealing with children were talking about those topics a little bit more than others. How did you determine what you were going to write about?
It depends on each book. I would say that there was a different motivation. For instance, my third book, that's also won the MCA Seal of Excellence, is called A Going Home Surprise. And I actually wrote that as a poem for a writing class that I took with a wonderful woman on the West Coast named Sheila Bender. And in her courses, since I'm on the East Coast, it was all done online, and I shared the poem about this little girl who found a lost kitten. Just a poem that I had written for no particular reason, because I just sometimes get a sense that this is a way to empower myself with self-expression. And I know many people who write poetry find that to be a motivation as well. So when Sheila reviewed my poem, she actually offered me some feedback. And she said, "Gee, Ann Marie, this is nice, but we need to know a little bit more about the girl in your poem and what she's doing and how it worked out." And I took that positive, negative feedback, and I added to the poem and just sort of left it alone for a while until after All About a Boy was published. I was looking to myself, my thought process to try and decide, well, what would be the next book to write? And I came across that poem again. I worked it and had to work getting illustrations developed for it, but I've been very successful in that one as well. And I can share with you some of the positive review comments. For example,
we do have time for you to do the excerpt from All About a Boy Who Was Afraid of the Dark. If you want to share that excerpt that you wanted to share, we'd love for you to be able to do that. Sure.
Okay. This part of the story is when Patrick has let out a big boo-hoo-hoo. And this woke up his little sister, his big sister, Margie, who was sleeping in her room next door. Still yawning, Margie opened the door. She said, "Patrick, you woke me up." But all Patrick could do was sit up in his bed and point towards his window and say, "Dark, dark, dark." Then he began to cry all over again. Margie stood there for a moment, trying to think of something to say. She had learned from Mom and Dad that it was important to talk things out and communicate in order to solve problems and get along with others. And since it was so dark, she slowly and carefully walked to Patrick's bed and sat down next to him. Then she put her arm around Patrick's shoulder and in a very grown-up, 5.5-year-old voice said, "Patrick, don't be afraid of the dark. The dark is something you sleep in, like a nice warm blanket or a soft, fluffy sleeping bag. And if we didn't have the dark, it sure would be hard to sleep." Patrick thought about it for a minute, finally stopped crying. He turned to Margie and thought about it even more. And then it just took a little while when Patrick decided it did make sense. He said to himself, "In the dark, it sure is a lot easier to sleep." Then he absolutely decided the dark was okay. He gave Margie a great big smile, even though she couldn't quite see his smile in the dark. And then Patrick wiped away his tears, quickly pulled the covers up close, just under his chin, and in no time at all went happily back to sleep. And the best estimate of when that happened was at 12:12 a.m. on the 12th day of the 12th month, just before Patrick's birthday. Okay.
I love it. Oh, my gosh, that was so awesome. Woo-hoo. And how so reassuring and so calming. The words that you chose, that really and truly sound like a very nurturing big sister. You know, not a reality TV answer. You know, not a ring answer, you little dweeb, don't do, nothing rude or anything like that, but instead very loving and very kind. I think, wow, we need to have that, because when you're afraid, you don't want to be belittled or made fun of or poked. You want to know that it's okay that you're feeling afraid, but you don't have to be afraid. What an awesome, I love it. Thank you for sharing that excerpt. That was perfect. That was perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
I love that. And that's why I believe firmly that people who choose to be an author of a kid's book, that you have to take that extra care, that you have to, you don't have the opportunity of making your point in 200 or 300 pages. You have very few pages, and you need to be concise and be able to do it in a way that the little one is able to grasp it and hold on to it. So thank you for sharing.
Well,
for sharing the way
you're very welcome. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Now, as a mom, my children are now all adults, but as a mom who, my mother read to me, and she made reading time fun. And my listeners know I have shared that before. You know, she brought every personality of each character alive. And it put that passion in me to want to read. So I did the same thing when my children were little. We had our little reading corner, our little nook where they could go and pull a book and enjoy reading if I wasn't able to read to them at that time. And I could see your book being one of those that would bring that comfort to any given situation. Thank you again for sharing that excerpt. Now, my next question for you, Ann Marie, is I know that if you've written more than one book, you may have another book that's on the outskirts, and you mentioned that there's some drafts kind of floating around, so I have to ask, do you have another book that you wish to release sometime in the near future?
Well, so my newest book is, and thank you again for asking, titled The First Day of School. And it is soon to be published with lots of surprisingly good guidance when a little girl has, quote, worries about her first day of school and how she overcomes her worries or sadness. Many youngsters have worries, so I'm hoping that my new book is a success in that regard if it helps solve a problem for a child whose sense of caring has resulted in worries. And that's my main goal.
I love it. Well, Ann Marie Hannon, thank you so much for spending time with me here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I have enjoyed spending time with you. I know that our listeners have enjoyed your sharing as well. If you could please, for the last time, remind everyone, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Great. I want to thank you, too, for the invitation to be interviewed. I think your work is over the top, and I hope that you continue as long as possible. We all need what you do, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to be a small part of your efforts to show others what it takes to do God's work in this world. Yeah. And my author site is authorsden.com/Ann Marie Hannon. And my book is all about a boy who was afraid of the dark and how he got over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann Marie, for being on the show today.
You're more than welcome.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with us as well. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you and your little ones to be the best that they can be. Well, as always, may you continue to find God's grace and mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, continue to know that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.